How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
We will be rolling out in podcast form the audio of all the interviews from the gathering. It was a great time. We had Brian Kemp's first public statement after Donald Trump's attacks on him the prior weekend. Mike Pence's first comments about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell's first interview outside of Kentucky since 2019. My buddy Chip Roy gave a barn burner of an address to the crowd. Got all that stuff. We'll get into some of that audio for you later in the show. Right now, however, I need to be provocative. I'm going to ask you to do something, particularly if you're a Donald Trump supporter. I want you to listen to this whole monologue because I'm about to make a lot of you really mad, and it's not my point. But what I say is going to make you mad, and then you're going to want to hang up and call the radio station and complain. But you should actually listen to everything I'm about to say to the bitter end. Because I need to start with a question. Trump supporters, more than any other group on the right, say Republicans have to fight like the Democrats. Republicans need to be as ruthless as the Democrats. That's what they say. You all know it. He fights. That's why they want Trump. He fights. Those other Republicans, the Romneys, the McCains, they sell out. Donald Trump fights. He is ruthless, and you got to be as ruthless as the Democrats to win. You got to do what the Democrats do to win. Whatever it takes to win, it's all about we need the power. Give us the power. We're going to fight like the Democrats to get the power. If that's the case, when does the GOP do what the Democrats did and toss their own octogenarian candidate who is flailing about in the polls? Now, before you get mad, just listen to the rest of this. Some points to be made. How you answer that question will shape you mentally for the next less than 90 days of this election. Do you say, as some are already starting to say, well, the polls are rigged, you can't believe them. They were fine when Donald Trump was ahead, and now suddenly they're rigged. Democrats hated Nate Silver, and now Silver has improved Harris's odds. Suddenly they like Nate Silver. And the Republicans like Silver, now they hate him. Republicans believe the polling, now they don't. Democrats didn't believe it, now they do. Complete role reversal. Or as some old boomer told me on social media, it's actually the computers. The computer algorithm is going to decide who's the president. We could vote or not vote. It doesn't matter. It's the computers. It's the software. Or it's going to be stolen. You know, it's already, they're amping up. It's going to be stolen. No matter what happens, it's going to be stolen. The excuse making is setting in, and that's part of the problem here. And that's a warning sign for Republicans. The excuse making has begun. You have the mental rhetorical challenges of Donald Trump, and the data out there looks bad. And I can tell you what's going on because there's a New York Times story that confirms my thesis. You know, it's the New York Times. See, if the New York Times says something interesting and positive about where Donald Trump is headed, you can believe it. But if not, it's got to be fake news, apparently. There's this. A week before a Hamptons fundraiser where he had a bunch of millionaires and billionaires present, on July 25th, Mr. Trump stunned one of his wealthiest patrons, Miriam Adelson, the widow of the casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, by having an aide, Natalie Harp, fire off a series of angry text messages to Mrs. Adelson in Mr. Trump's name, according to 3 people with knowledge of what took place. The texts were particularly jarring because Mrs. Adelson and Mr. Trump had a friendly meeting just a week earlier at the Republican National Convention, according to a person briefed on the matter. The texts complained about the people running Mrs. Adelson's super PAC, Preserve America, into which she is pouring millions of dollars to support Mr. Trump. At the time, Preserve America was spending nearly $18 million a week worth of ads aiding Mr. Trump in 3 battleground states. The texts said that the officials running Preserve America were rhinos, Republicans in name only, and that Mrs. Adelson's late husband would never have tolerated that, the people said. According to two of the people, aides to Mrs. Adelson later discovered the outburst against her had been encouraged by another major Trump donor, Ike Perlmutter, the former chairman of Marvel Entertainment, who had hoped in vain that Mrs. Adelson would contribute to a rival super PAC that he backs. The text messages prompted concerns as yet unrealized that Mrs. Adelson might scale back her support. Now, let's go back to what happened in Georgia on stage. Donald Trump, before he got on stage, had been surrounded by some angry old people in Georgia who don't like Brian Kemp for scuttling Buckhead City, an effort the legislature wouldn't allow to go forward to incorporate a new city in the northern Atlanta financial suburbs. So what did Donald Trump do? He got on stage and attacked Brian Kemp and his wife because an angry old man had gotten to him before he got on stage. And here another angry old man, Mr. Perlmutter, got to Donald Trump and railed against Ms. Adelson. What happened? Donald Trump channeled the anger towards Ms. Adelson. Donald Trump is now live again on Twitter. He just started posting about an hour ago. My guess is this is a campaign-controlled account and not necessarily him. That's a good thing. Donald Trump has been off his game since, understandably, he got shot. A bullet piercing his ear. That level of trauma does something to a person. He's now very angry. That anger is a natural traumatic response. The problem is there are less than 90 days to go, and Donald Trump is well off his game. He attracted attention over the weekend for attacking the Democratic senator of Montana for being fat. The biggest stomach he's ever seen, just a grossly big stomach. He's off his game. Now, Donald Trump lacks the discipline. You know, last week I spent several days diagnosing, here's what you do. You go to local media, ignore the national media. You do a barnstorming press tour. You sit down with the local media. You let them do that. You build up your ground game. The problem is Trump is Trump. He's not going to change. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. If the Trump supporters who say we have to be as ruthless as the Democrats are right, then the Republicans need to toss Donald Trump from the race, because if you take the polling averages, pick your favorite polling average. You can say you have none, but you all look. His hard level of support has not risen from about 43 to 44%. In fact, what all the polling is doing right now, and this is where we need to head in this discussion while you're still mad at me for my opening question, he hasn't gained support. What's happened is a lot of Democrats who didn't want to vote for Biden are coming home to Kamala Harris. It's notable that Harris's surge coincides with a collapse in support for Robert Kennedy. These Democrats no longer need a protest vote. So she's beginning to consolidate Democrats in a way Biden couldn't, and Trump is not bringing new people outside of his hardcore support to him, and that's a problem. If this continues, the Republicans will lose in November. But, and this is why the answer to the question, should the Republicans throw Donald Trump off the ballot, just like the Democrats did to Biden, the answer to the question is actually no. No. What we're seeing right now is partly a honeymoon effect from Kamala Harris. She's next week got her convention. She will define herself because the Trump campaign in the last 4 weeks have failed to define her. They will allow her to define herself. And her polling will probably go up a little more. But Donald Trump and his team, once everything is locked in, I have a stinking suspicion. One reason they've operated the way they've operated is because outside of the online clamor about Tim Walz, it hasn't really pierced the national zeitgeist, national conversation. They're waiting for the convention to lock in the Harris-Walz ticket before they come out swinging hard with a national media campaign. Once the Democrats lock in their choices next week, then the Republicans will go to work publicly. They don't want the Democrats to pull the rug out from under them again. The problem here, though, for Trump is the clock is ticking on his ability to exercise some message discipline. Behind the scenes, his campaign is telling people he understands the problem. But behind the scenes, they're also telling people he's so angry, it's causing him problems. He's angry for lots of reasons. First and foremost, he nearly died. Secondly, his campaign was too successful in throwing Joe Biden overboard. The campaign of Donald Trump really had a big role in developing the national conversation about Joe Biden, which ultimately led to him leaving. His campaign was too successful. What they probably should have done is waited to accept Joe Biden's debates after Joe Biden received the Democratic nomination and locked him in place, where it becomes vastly more difficult to change the ballot. Trump doesn't need to be thrown overboard. In fact, frankly, I think that the Republicans now deserve to sink or swim with the Trump ticket. You put all your eggs in this basket, so now you're either going to own it or not. Now, if you lose, I know what's going to happen. We're going to relitigate stolen elections. The computer stole it. The algorithm picked it. There were nefarious dealings. It was China. It was Russia. Excuses will be made. Outcomes will never be accepted again in American politics. But ultimately, Trump deserves the opportunity to turn this around. And Republicans who dislike Donald Trump, and I'm not a fan, Republicans who dislike Donald Trump should give the man the opportunity. He took a bullet. He deserves the opportunity to turn his campaign around. He deserves the opportunity to reinvigorate his campaign with a message that focuses on Kamala Harris's policies, not her looks, not her background, not her race, not the size of other candidates' stomachs. Donald Trump deserves the opportunity. He weathered the storm. He took a bullet. Let him relaunch his campaign. He's got less than 90 days. That's the problem. That's why people are nervous. He has the opportunity to do it. He should be given the opportunity to do it. Now, in doing so, we have to understand the media is out to get him. The media is fully on board the Harris Walz campaign. They are doing everything they can to distract from Tim Walz lying repeatedly about his service record. They're doing everything possible to deflect from that. They're doing everything possible not to challenge Kamala Harris. The Trump campaign is trotting J.D. Vance out to do all of these interviews. Republicans say they have to be as ruthless as Democrats. Democrats threw their candidate overboard. There will be some Republicans say, well, we must do the same to Donald Trump. Actually, no. What you should do is you should be very vocal to Donald Trump, who cares greatly for his base, by the way. Trump actually does really care about his hardcore supporters. And so those hardcore supporters owe it to Donald Trump to be loudly candid with Donald Trump that you got to focus on Harris's policies. Stop with the petty grievances. Stop with fights with Republicans. Stop with all the stuff about how she looks or what her race is. Focus on her policies, Donald Trump. Focus on how bad she would be for the economy. It's the economy, stupid. Focus on the economy. Focus on groceries. Focus on gas. Focus, focus, focus. If Donald Trump's not capable of doing it, well, he's the same Donald Trump we've always had, and it'll be Republicans who have to hold themselves and his supporters accountable after Election Day for getting the same results you got in 2020. Again, if you think it's going to be stolen and it was stolen in 2020, why the hell do you nominate the guy who had it stolen from him when he was sitting the president, and now he's not the sitting president? But otherwise, Donald Trump is owed the right to reboot his campaign. He's got to do so immediately. He should not be tossed off the ballot. Republicans who want to stop Kamala Harris should actually rally around Donald Trump. Wish him well, pray for him, and be very, very vocal. Don't hide it, but be loud about it, that your campaign has got to change. Donald Trump cares about his support. He cares about his base. He cares deeply about his base being taken advantage of by grifters on the right. If he cares that much about them, he doesn't want to disappoint them. But his base of support, has to be vocal that this isn't working. Fix your message. Get it done today. You are our nominee, and we've got to stop Harris. If he can do that, maybe he can still win this thing. Because I'm not convinced all the Hispanics saying they're going to vote for Kamala Harris really want her in office. And that's something the Trump campaign is going to have to figure out. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. I got to tell you, I sometimes think that some of Trump supporters are his worst enemy. For example, there are clips of Tim Walz claiming to have served in Afghanistan and to suffer PTSD that have surfaced on the internet, which isn't true. But if you actually watch the clip, that's not actually what he's saying at all. He's actually having conversations about soldiers, not himself, who served in Afghanistan, who suffered PTSD, and he's blatantly mischaracterized Tim Walz's statements, which undermines the credibility of all the statements where Tim Walz did lie about his record. When you start crying wolf about stuff that's not true, people don't believe the real stuff. And the real stuff is Tim Walz actually gave a speech where he claimed to have been at Bagram Air Force Base in Iraq. Bagram Air Force Base is not in Iraq, it's in Afghanistan. He was never there. And his commander put this up on Facebook. I do not regret that Tim Walz retired early from the Minnesota Army National Guard and did not complete the Sergeant Major Academy, broke his enlistment contract, or did not successfully complete any assignment as a Sergeant Major. Unwittingly, he got out of the way for better leadership. Thomas Behrens was the right leader at the right time. He sacrificed to answer the call, leaving his family business and farming partner brother to train, lead, and care for soldiers. He earned the privilege of being called Command Sergeant Major. Like a great leader, he ran toward and not away from the guns. I have no opinion on Mr. Walz's decision to leave service at the time he did. It was his right to retire early. I also have no criticism of his service as an E7 and E8. By all accounts and on the record, he was a competent chief of firing, battery gunner sergeant, and first sergeant. I cannot say the same of his service sitting rocked in the CSM chair. He did not earn the rank or successfully complete any assignment as an E9. It's an affront to the non-commissioned officer corps that he continues to glom onto the title. That's his battalion commander talking about Tim Walz. There's plenty there. You don't have to make stuff up about him. There's plenty of stuff there, and Republicans should make this a big issue. It's circulating big on social media, but it has yet to penetrate the national conversation of people who are off Twitter. Some of these super PACs should step up and make sure it does. Now, I got to tell you, I had a lot of great sponsors at my event this week, The Gathering. Americans for Prosperity was one of them. They've been a partner for some time, and I'm delighted that they stepped up, did some great panel discussions, and helped make it possible. You can also sign up for Americans for Prosperity. As I was telling people at the event, Americans for Prosperity is the nation's leading and largest grassroots organization. They will bring you in, train you up as an activist, as a volunteer, as someone who can knock on doors and persuade voters about our side's issues. They'll educate you on our side's issues. They'll teach you how to go to your local government and state government to advance our side's issues. They focus on school choice and families and deregulation and small business and freedom and free markets. They would love to have you partner with them. If you're interested in finding out more, go to americansforprosperity.org, americansforprosperity.org. I thank them greatly for their friendship, for their sponsorship this weekend, for their help with this radio program, and really encourage you to check them out, americansforprosperity.org. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you'd like to be on the program, I'm happy to have you. As always, if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the podcast, the live stream. Follow me around social media. We're going to be trotting out the clips from the gathering on social media, and we'll be rolling out the interviews. We're going to extract the audio from the video. Oh, that reminds me. Charlie and Philip, I need you to do this. We'll do 2 a day or so, and over the next week, we'll roll out those conversations. I mean, we had Brian Kemp and Doug Ducey and Kevin Stitt and Ron DeSantis. We had Mike Pence, Mitch McConnell, Rick Scott, Kelly Loeffler, Chip Roy, Kevin Hearn. So we did a former vice president, 4 governors, 3 senators, 2 members of Congress, 2 Senate candidates, and a whole lot more. Honestly, one of the best conversations we had, and I want to talk about it later in the show, is on China and the incursions into this country that people have no idea the Chinese have issues. Oh, you know some of them, but you don't know all of them. It was actually kind of like freaked out the crowd by just how much China has already invaded us, and people don't even realize it. We'll get into that discussion later. Right now, however, I want to shift gears to something else. The Harris-Walz team is doing a very careful job with the help of the American media to not campaign on the press. That is, they're not doing interviews. Kamala Harris isn't sitting down for Meet the Press. Neither is Walz. They're fundraising, planning the convention, doing scripted, tightly organized events with teleprompters. They're not doing free-form interviews. Donald Trump is not either. But what Trump is doing is sitting out J.D. Vance. What's so funny to me is that one of Kamala Harris's campaign directors, after a series of very good interviews with J.D. Vance on television this weekend, said, it's disastrous interviews. So you don't actually have to go watch the interviews yourself. If you're a Democrat, you can just take your talking point from the top. Say, they were disastrous interviews. Actually, they were really good interviews, including this encounter with Dana Bash on CNN.
That he said weapons of war. He was talking in a campaign stop about, he was trying to talk about gun control.
Sure.
And he said weapons of war I carried in war. I will say that the Harris-Walz campaign did say that the governor misspoke there.
Sure.
Do you accept that?
He misspoke. Another word is that he lied about it, and he didn't correct the record for 15 years until he was put under political pressure because I called it out, Dana. Whatever you want to call it, a misspeaking or a lie, I think Tim Walz should have to correct the record. Now, you pointed out a soldier who defended his service. There have been a number of soldiers who served with Tim Walz who have criticized him on the exact same grounds that I have, because it's not right to misstate or to embellish what you've done, and I think that's what he did.
She also pointed out it was done on CNN. Did you miss the interview? Here's a little more of this.
Okay, you've now asked me 3 questions about comments that I made 3 years ago. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she supported policies that opened the American southern border. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she lied to the American people about Joe Biden's middle facility for the office. You are interviewing me, Dana, because I respect the American people enough to sit down for an interview.
I appreciate that.
Kamala Harris has been the nominee for 3 weeks. She hasn't sat down for a real interview.
Believe me, we are asking. You're not going to get a disagreement there.
But the point is, Dana, you've got me for 15 minutes or however long you have me. We should be talking about public policies that matter. How are we going to lower inflation? How are we going to reduce the cost of food and housing? How are we going to close down that southern border? We've talked so little about that. We've talked a lot more about a sarcastic remark I made 3 years ago. I think we should talk about the issues that most Americans care about.
I only asked.
He's really good at this. He's really good at this.
I believe that Kamala Harris is whatever she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she's a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one audience. She pretends to be something different in front of another audience. Look, Dana, she's not running a political campaign. She's running a movie. She only speaks to voters behind a teleprompter. Everything is scripted. She doesn't have her policy positions out there. She hasn't answered why she wanted to ban fracking, but now she doesn't. She wanted to fund police, but now she doesn't. She wanted to open the border, but now she doesn't. She should have to answer for why she presents a different set of policies to one audience and a different set of policies to another audience. And I think that's what President Trump is getting at. This is a fundamentally fake person. She's different depending on who she's in front of.
Again, he is focused. His running mate isn't. That's why they've got Vance doing these interviews, and he's the only one of these candidates. It is kind of wild. You've got 4 people running for national office coast to coast, and only one of them is sitting down with the media regularly. And it's not just CNN. I mean, he also sat down and did it with John Carl on ABC.
What President Trump said, John, is that Tim Walz has supported taking children from their parents if the parents don't consent to gender reassignment. That is crazy. And by the way, Tim Walz gets on his high horse about mind your own damn business. One way of minding your own damn business, John, is to not try to take my children away from me if I have different moral views than you.
A state to kidnap children to change their sexual identity.
What I just explained to you, I would describe as kidnapping, John. He has absolutely done this stuff. It's not crazy, John. Come on.
It's not.
You should not be able to take people's children away from them.
And that's not what he's proposed.
If you disagree with decisions about gender reassignment, yes, he has proposed that, John. He absolutely has.
By the way, John Carl, 2 years ago, we've got the video. I forgot to download it for you, but 2 years ago, John Carl talked about Kamala Harris's role as at the border and overseeing the southern border. And I was like, she was never the border czar. John Carl, I think, is one of the people who's been broken by Trump, doesn't want Trump to get back in office, and yet J.D. Vance sat down and did an interview with him. J.D. Vance was willing to do the interview. It was combative, but he was willing to do it. He has done he's doing the full Ginsburg. Back in the day, there was an elections lawyer back in 2000 for George W. Bush named Ben Ginsburg. He's one of the best election lawyers to ever walk the planet. And Ben Ginsburg would do, they now call it the full Ginsburg. Ben Ginsburg would do Face the Nation, This Week, Meet the Press, and Fox News Sunday on Sunday. He would appear on all 4 shows on the same day. They refer to it to this day as doing the full Ginsburg. J.D. Vance is on his way to doing the full Ginsburg, and Kamala Harris isn't, Donald Trump isn't, Tim Walz isn't, and Vance is quick on his feet. And he's smart to do this. But I also need to say something else. It is an issue Republicans should, in fact, take on. Tim Walz lying about his service record. God bless him for his 24 years in service. He lied about how it ended. He didn't misrepresent. He lied. But you know what? Tim Walz is not running to be president of the United States of America. Kamala Harris is running to be president of the United States of America. And every day that Republicans are talking about Tim Walz or John Tester's girth or Kamala Harris's race is not a day Republicans are talking about Kamala Harris's policies. A day they're not talking about Kamala Harris's flip-flops. It's a day that we're not talking about Kamala Harris covering for Joe Biden like this.
We have a very bold and vibrant president in Joe Biden.
But a majority of Americans, a majority of Democrats, according to our new poll, say they don't want President Biden to run again. What do you say to them?
I mean, George, I think that age is more than a chronological fact, to be very frank with you. It's about thinking about whether we have in our leader, which we do in Joe Biden, somebody who is bold. I mean, think about it. And in Joe Biden, we have a president who is probably one of the boldest and strongest American presidents we have had in his response to the needs of the American people. But he is an extraordinary leader, and I wish that people could see what I see, because there's only one person who sits behind that resolute desk.
You're 58 now. If you win the second term, as you and the president are running to do, he would be 86 at the end of it. The Wall Street Journal had a poll showing 2/3 of Democrats say Joe Biden is too old to run again. Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine. And let me tell you something. I work with Joe Biden every day. The work that under Joe Biden's leadership our administration has accomplished is transformative.
There you go. How can you believe anything she says about no longer supporting fracking? How can you believe anything she says? You know, it's so interesting. You got Simone Sanders, who used to work for her on MSNBC now, who is running the propaganda for Harris. Listen to this soundbite. This is very important. Listen to this.
Some additional policy proposals this past weekend, one on exempting tips from taxes, federal taxes, some more specific contours around Harris's border policy if she were to become president, not just signing that very strong enforcement bill, but also creating more pathways to citizenship.
Did you get that at the beginning? Kamala Harris claims that she supports getting rid of the tax on tips, that's one of her public policy proposals. Not one of her public policy proposals. In fact, it's one she criticized, but it looks like the polling shows it's popular. A policy proposal from Donald Trump. Kamala Harris has decided to take that policy proposal and claim it's her own. And on MSNBC now, remember, people on MSNBC are less likely to watch other news sources than even people at Fox. Fox people get out of their bubble. MSNBC people, they get their news from MSNBC. So today, there are a lot of idiots walking around the country who believe that Kamala Harris has come up with a new idea on her own to end the taxation of tips. And they love it because Kamala Harris proposed it, even though it was a signature initiative of Donald Trump's. But how can you believe her? This is a woman who lied for Joe Biden. This is a woman who supported banning fracking and now doesn't. It's John Kerry on steroids. And notice, of course, the media continues to cover for her. I distinctly believe, and I truly do believe this with respect to my friends who are in the press, that I think one of the avenues that a super PAC somewhere should go down is making the press an issue in this race. They covered for Joe Biden in the same way they're now covering for Kamala Harris. They refuse to ask her the tough questions. Undermining the press's credibility is actually a secret weapon I think the Republicans can use. How can you believe this that they're saying about Donald Trump when look at what all they've lied for the Democrats? Undermine everything they do. Undermine everything they say. Treat the press as the enemy these days, as Donald Trump has wanted to do. He called him the enemy of the people, enemy of the American public. They kind of are at this point on the Democratic side, so treat them as such. Treat them as a propaganda organ for the Democrats and undermine their credibility further. Drive them all into bankruptcy. Might as well. I mean, they're clearly out to get the Republican side. Fair and balance my foot. They are out to destroy Donald Trump as best they can. So treat them as agents of the Democrats. Remind people how they lied for Joe Biden and covered for Joe Biden and conspired with the Biden team. Remind people of that. And then undermine Kamala Harris. Undermine Kamala Harris's claims. Note how the media is now covering for her on her reversal on fracking and everything else. J.D. Vance is out there doing the hard work. He's putting in the sweat equity. Now the campaign's got to step up. We need to see the ads. They need to be on TV. They need to be on radio. They need to be by text message. Yes, send people video files to their phones. It's highly effective. Had that conversation with my buddy Chris Wilson on stage at the gathering that it actually more so than direct mail, video is sending videos, short little clips to people's phones is actually a very persuasive way to change people's minds on stuff. We should be doing these sorts of things on our side. The fact that we're not right now, maybe they are waiting so that they get through the nomination, and then once it's all locked in, they'll do it. But I don't know. At least Vance is out there putting in the work. He's turning into showing his worth on the campaign trail as he goes out and does these combative interviews with the press where members of the press express their frustration with him. When you've got members of the press asking him combative questions and he smoothly deflects those questions as he does and they complain about him as an interviewer, that's actually a very good sign for his abilities on the stage. Guys, I forgot the last commercial break to tell you about Vision Computers. If you call them at 404-COMPUTER, go to visioncomputers.com. They can build you computers and they can be your IT support for your existing computers, just $179 a year. You might even get a discount if you call them at 404-COMPUTE and tell them I sent you. They're great people. Actually, the owner came to the gathering, got to hang out with him a little bit on Thursday night. Just a great guy. Around the country, it doesn't matter whether you're in Salem, Oregon, or you're in Palm Beach, Florida, Vision Computers can actually build computers for you or for your company, for your home or for your office, and then they'll service them as well. And by the way, the tech support comes free if you get your computer from them. But if you've got a computer and you need help, you can't afford an IT department, Vision can take on that role. All you do is call them at 404-COMPUTE for $179 per computer a year, not a month, but a year. Your employee or you get the special phone number. You call them 15 seconds or less. You get the answer to what's ailing your computer. So work with them, any one of you nationwide, 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Now, I want to call on Chad from Montgomery, Alabama. Chad, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Eric, we talked a couple of weeks ago on labor law issues. Hey, listen, I've got a plan that I think that the Trump campaign ought to think about. I call it the R&R plan. It's rest and reboot. He should take the 5-day convention period for the Democrats, go off the trail, huddle up with his team, get a little bit of rest, and then go through the policy issues that he should talk about every time. Come up with a list: fracking, border, men and women's sports, inflation, home ownership, taxes on tips, the international mess, and say, look, here's the deal, Mr. President. Everything you should say should be about one of these 10 issues. Do not go off the script. Now, of course, he's Donald Trump, so he's going to go off script, but at least you can start nailing in, to his head. You've got to talk about these issues, because that's why JD is being so successful in his interviews and so forth. He no matter what, was thrown at him by Dana Bash, he came back, and there was another interviewer that he did several interviews, Kristen Welker, who was also just as aggressive. He did a great job in that interview. But I think Trump obviously is discombobulated. He was so hoping he was going to run this campaign against Biden. He can't get over the fact that Biden's no longer the candidate. And I really think that's thrown him for a loop. But if he'll just take the time, he's already said he's going to kind of lay low during the convention. If they can just, squirrel him away for 4 or 5 days, sit down, somebody who has an honest ear with him, maybe one of his sons who's not a sycophant, sit down and say, look, Dad, we got to get back on message, because you have no message right now. And you're, I want Trump to win, but your monologue was spot on. And I know so many Republicans like myself that are saying the same thing. We are literally tearing our hair out watching this, because it's so easy, Eric, And then I read this headline today. He's talking about suing the Justice Department for $100 million, And I'm like, stop it, Talk about fracking, border, men and women, inflation, home ownership, that people can't even buy a house anymore. Their tuition's so high. They have, most of the folks I know that are my children's age, they don't have the money to buy a house because they have $150,000 in tuition.
Yep, you're right.
To repay. And a lot of that is because the government took over, the funding program for the colleges, and the colleges raised the tuition to meet the level of funding they could get.
Yeah.
Look,
Chad, you're absolutely right. All I can do is say, amen. I got to let you go there because I got this commercial break coming. But man, that's so well said. I hope I know they listen to the show. I hope they're listening to you. This is how the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you're buying a building, buying a franchise, need a heavy equipment loan, they can help you. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com. When we come back, as you are aware, I'm a friend of David French's. He has written a piece in the New York Times saying he's voting for Kamala Harris. Oh, do I have some thoughts on that? I'll get into them when we come back.